Okay, welcome to video number 41 of the Diaries of a Coronavirologist YouTube channel. Today is the 18th of October and we are up to about 56 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 around the world and about 1.3 million confirmed deaths. As I'm sure everyone's aware, there's a huge amount of spiking in cases of COVID-19 around the world, and this is obviously very bad news. But in that sort of weird silver lining kind of way, that's good for companies that are trying to produce vaccines and show that they work. The more cases there are, the easier it is to work out if vaccines are effective. So tonight's video is actually a good news one. So in my video last week, I was talking about the Pfizer/BioNTech vaccine candidate. So the candidate vaccine was produced by BioNTech, and Pfizer are the ones who are funding and managing the clinical trials. There, I was talking about the interim report of 94 confirmed COVID-19 cases within their clinical trial and their vaccine showing 90% efficacy. Now, I don't want to recap that whole video. I'll link to it down below in the description for this video if you want to go back and watch it if you haven't already. In that video, I talked about how it's an mRNA-based vaccine and how the data were looking really promising, but there were many questions we wanted answers to. I also talked about the fact that Moderna, an American company, have a similar approach of an mRNA vaccine, which is also in phase 3 clinical trials. And I said I expected we'd get the data fairly soon. And that was indeed the case. On Monday, Moderna announced a similar point of 95 cases of COVID-19 in their trial and announced the efficacy data. Not to be outdone, though, Pfizer have since come out today and released more information of hitting their other endpoint for a release of 170 cases. So I've got two things to talk about today, the Moderna data and the Pfizer second data dump, as it were. So both of these are press releases. There is no data dump that we can go and look at. This is just a press release from the companies saying this is what we found in our trial. It's not peer reviewed, so that has some caveats attached to it. But I want to just focus on the good stuff today. As I say, it's a positive video tonight. So just as a very quick recap, as I say, these are mRNA vaccines. So what that means is the vaccine carries the mRNA sequence, which is the instructions the cells use to produce protein. The mRNA in these vaccines, it encodes the instructions for the spike protein of the SARS-2 coronavirus. So when the vaccine is injected, the cells that the vaccine goes into will produce the spike protein. The immune system will see that and mount an antibody response to it. It's only the spike protein of the virus, so there's no damage caused in the same way a virus would. But if a virus comes in to infect you after you've received that vaccine, you have the antibodies and you can mount an antibody response to target the spike protein of the real virus and therefore be protected against it. So both vaccines I'm going to talk about tonight use a very, very similar technology. There's a couple of differences between them, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But like I say, I want to keep this video focused on all the good stuff, which is the efficacy data. So I'll start with Moderna, as they released their data on Monday in their press release. So I'll take this one chronologically. It's an mRNA vaccine, as I'm saying, and their trial is involving 30,000 people, split into half between receiving the vaccine or placebo. And they hit their endpoint, or their first endpoint goal for the interim report on data of 95 patients. They found that 90 of those people who developed COVID-19 were given the placebo, and the other 5 were given the true vaccine. So this is an efficacy of 94.5%. So slightly one-upping Pfizer's report of 90% efficacy. Moderna did actually give a few more details as well in terms of the severity of disease. So of all those 95 cases, 11 people developed severe COVID, or something that was categorized as severe COVID, and they were all in the placebo control arm. So it really looks like their vaccine is helping not only prevent infection, but also prevent severity. Similarly to the Pfizer press release from last week, they also talked a little bit about the safety data, saying that there were no severe adverse events and talking about the fact that there was only mild issues. So pain at the site of injection, a bit of a headache for a day or two, maybe a mild fever, a bit of fatigue, the kind of things you get from a vaccine, but nothing classed as severe or to merit this having any safety issues. So this is all great data. nearly 95% efficacy with no safety issues is better than we really could have hoped for. Again, as I said in my last video, approval for these kind of vaccines was looking at anything above 50%. So to be hitting upwards of 90 is fantastic and puts these vaccines in amongst the best that have ever been produced at this stage. And again, similarly to what Pfizer did last week, Moderna came out with an estimate of the number of vaccine doses they'll be able to produce. So they've said that they think they'll be able to produce 20 million doses by the end of 2020 and 1 billion doses by the end of 2021. So this is pretty similar and comparable to what Pfizer have said. So Pfizer said that they could produce 50 million by the end of this year and 1.3 billion by the end of next year. Now, similarly to the Pfizer vaccine, the Moderna vaccine requires 2 doses. So those number of vaccines that they say they can produce, or vaccine doses, doesn't equate to the number of people. So Moderna are hoping to vaccinate 10 million people by the end of this year and 500 million by the end of next year. However, combine that with the numbers for Pfizer, so by the end of next year, 500 million for Moderna and 650 million for Pfizer, that's over 1 billion people that could be vaccinated with these 2 vaccines that are looking really promising. There's many other vaccines that are in phase 3 trials similar to these. So, for example, I talked about the Novavax vaccine on this channel. I talked about the Oxford University ChAdOx vaccine that's being done in collaboration with AstraZeneca. If they come out with anywhere near similar numbers, things are looking really promising in our fight against COVID-19. And the final thing to say about the Moderna vaccine and the announcement they made on Monday with comparison to the Pfizer from last week, or the Pfizer information from last week, is that this vaccine is stored at minus 20 Celsius, which is the temperature you find in your standard freezer that you have at home. That's obviously compared to Pfizer, who require the ultra cold storage at minus 70 to minus 80 Celsius. So this makes storage and distribution of the Moderna vaccine much easier. Now, I've been asked by a few people why the Pfizer vaccine has to be stored at such a cold temperature. And it basically boils down to the fact that mRNA is pretty unstable. There's a lot of things out there that can degrade mRNA and can therefore destroy this vaccine. By keeping it cold, you limit that degradation. So it means the vaccines can stay viable for longer. Why there's the difference between the two isn't fully clear. The formulation of these vaccines, how they wrap up that mRNA for delivery into a human cell, is a proprietary formulation from each company. But that sort of formulation is the kind of thing that affects the temperature. So Moderna's formulation is possibly better at minus 20, whereas Pfizer's isn't quite so stable at minus 20 and therefore needs minus 80. So the only reason these need to be stored that level of cold, or the comparative levels of cold, is for stability of the vaccine. Obviously, we want them to be as stable as possible so that we can make as many as possible, store them, and then distribute them to the people who need them. But this is all looking great. We had great news from Pfizer last week that their vaccine was showing 90% efficacy in the 94 people who got infected with the virus or developed COVID-19 within their study. And then Moderna come out and say that from their 95 people, they've got 94.5% efficacy. However, Pfizer weren't to be outdone, and today they released more information from their trial. So they've now hit their second target to release data from, which was originally stated, I read, at 164. They've actually released information from 170 people. So 170 people in their trial of a little bit over 40,000 people have developed COVID-19. Of those, 8 were in the vaccine group, and the remaining 162 were in the placebo group. So this gives the Pfizer vaccine a 95% efficacy. So it's actually gone up from the information they released last week. I speculated it may go down when we got more cases, but I was clearly wrong. So we're now looking at the Pfizer vaccine having 95% efficacy from their 170 cases within their trial. And this is, again, fantastic news. 170 was the pre-agreed number for the Pfizer vaccine trial to reach in order for them to apply for emergency usage authorization with the FDA and similar authorizations with other similar bodies around the world. So this means they can start to look to distribute it. If they're given this emergency use authorization, the EUA, they can start to distribute this vaccine to people who need to receive it. And it's looking like it's really promising and really working. The other good thing to come from today's announcement from Pfizer was they actually gave a bit more detail on the breakdown of things, people who develop severe diseases, age groupings, and the like. So another really important thing that they came out with today is that the efficacy didn't seem to be any different across age ranges. So even in the 65 plus age range, the vaccine was still showing 94% efficacy. And obviously the elder age groups are the ones at most risk and who are going to require this vaccine more than the younger age groups. In terms of severe disease, Pfizer, like Moderna, had 11 severe COVID-19 cases in this trial. Of their 170 people, there were 11 people who got severe COVID-19, and only one of those was in their vaccinated group. So it's looking like the vaccine is protecting people from developing COVID-19 and preventing development of severe disease. So potentially, that one's obviously, the numbers there are very small. So 1 person out of 8 developed severe disease, probably too small to make any statistical claims, similar to Moderna, but still great news. We're seeing massive protection in terms of the percentage. As I said about Moderna, and I keep stressing, 50% would have been enough to take this to FDA and similar approval bodies. 90% plus puts this amongst the best vaccines we've ever produced. Smallpox vaccine, which eradicated that virus, was 95%. The measles vaccine is 97% effective. So we're right up there with some of the best vaccines that have ever been produced at this early stage with these early numbers, of course. So one small thing I would like to just point out before I close out this video is that these are press releases from the companies that are producing these vaccines and trying to get them to market. However, the numbers and the data they are producing are assessed by an independent review panel prior to the companies announcing them. So the companies are being blinded to the trial. So it's a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. So the people administering the vaccines don't know who's getting what. So the people assessing the data don't know who's got what, be it that placebo or vaccine. When there's cases, those cases are obviously found, and you can tell someone has COVID-19 by doing tests for that, but you don't know if they received the vaccine or the placebo. It's then the independent review panels that are looking at the unblinded information or are unblinding the information to find out these numbers, which they're then releasing to the companies. So of course the companies have vested interest in getting these to market, but it's independent review panels that are assessing the data prior to these press releases. So these data are good data. They're amazing data that we are seeing. So I could, of course, go in to discuss all the caveats and things like that. So the small number of people, the fact we don't know how long-lived immunity will be in, or etc. But I might save that for a different video. Today I just want to focus on the positives. In under a year, we now have 2 vaccines that are on the verge of going into humans outside of clinical trials for a virus that didn't exist this time last year. That's absolutely unheard of and absolutely amazing from Moderna and Pfizer and BioNTech and all the people who have volunteered to receive these vaccines. So I suspect that within the next couple of weeks, Pfizer will put together the EUA documentation, send it off to the FDA and similar places around the world. And I reckon by December time, people will start receiving this Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine who aren't in their clinical trial. It's going to be prioritized, as I talked about in my last video, and I suspect it will go to the healthcare workers who are on the front line doing amazing work with COVID patients because they're the ones at most risk. So they'll be the first ones to get this vaccine, and then there'll be a gradual rollout through the people who are most at risk, so healthcare workers and then the elderly. And while all that's going on, this trial and the Moderna trial will still be going on. There'll still be assessment of the safety. There'll still be assessments of the efficacy. So this isn't finished. These people are going to keep being continually monitored to make sure that these vaccines are safe. This isn't over by any means, but this is now a stage where we can look to get approvals and start the distribution of these vaccines, which is so sorely needed to get this pandemic under control. So having 2 vaccines at this stage is great. And as I say, there's other vaccines that are in phase 3 clinical trials, which I suspect we'll get the data from fairly soon. So 2021 is looking promising for us getting vaccines quite widely distributed. If these two companies can deliver, as I say, that's 1 billion people that they should be able to vaccinate. That's a seventh of the world population. We're getting there. And I'm going to leave this video there on that happy note. This has been a great 2 days of news for the scientific fight against SARS-2 virus and COVID-19. And I really want to focus on that positive. These two vaccines are looking absolutely incredible. As I alluded to, though, there are many caveats and considerations for both of these vaccines. On my last video, I got a lot of great questions about the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine and some concerns and what my views were. I suspect this one may be similar, so please do leave questions and comments below. What I'm going to do is try and roll all that into my next video. So of course, these are just press releases. It's not a peer-reviewed paper, so there's implications there. There's questions surrounding the how do we know there's no long-term effects from these vaccines because it's been so short. There's the caveats about how long-lived immunity will be, all those kind of things. So instead of putting that into this video, I thought I'd save that and do a full video next week, trying to capture the concerns and the questions that people raise with me through YouTube and through conversations I'm having with people. But as I say, today I really want to just focus on the positive. This is just amazing news to see these two vaccines doing so well. And that's all I'm going to say for tonight. So as always, if you found the video useful and interesting, please drop a like for the YouTube metrics. And if you're new around here, subscribe and hit the notification bell if you want to know when I put up new videos. Twitter is also a good place to find those updates. I put my handle down in the description for each of the videos I do if you want to follow me there. As I said, please do put questions and comments down below. I'll try and tackle them on YouTube and also try and roll them into the next video, as I was saying. And as always, please stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask. This is still here just because we've hit this point of having some vaccines that are looking for approval doesn't mean we're through this. Keep physically distancing, keep wearing a mask, keep washing your hands, please keep doing it. But also keep calm and carry on. We are going to get through this.